Welcome to Cosmo Talks. I'm Petra. In this special bonus episode, we dive deep into the enteric nervous system, your second brain, and how you can be a good host for your microorganisms. Because together, you form a fascinating ecosystem. And when the interaction is right, when the crosstalk functions optimally, you flourish. You have two brains. One is in your skull, that one you know, that one gets all the attention. The other is in your abdominal wall, 500 million nerve cells wrapped around your intestines like a stocking. It operates largely independently. It makes decisions without consulting your brain. It has its own reflexes, its own neurotransmitters, its own memory. This is the enteric nervous system, and it's time you got to know it, because this second brain determines far more than just your digestion. It influences your mood, your immune system, your stress response, and it constantly talks with your microbiome. Let's start with the basics. What exactly is this system? The enteric nervous system, often abbreviated to ENS, is an extensive network of nerve cells embedded in the walls of your digestive tract. From esophagus to rectum, 9 meters of nerve tissue. It consists of two main layers. The first is the myenteric plexus, also called Auerbach's plexus. This sits between the muscle layers of your intestinal wall and controls movements, the peristalsis that pushes food through your system. The second is the submucosal plexus, or Meissner's plexus. This sits closer to the intestinal surface and controls secretion and absorption, which enzymes are secreted, which substances are absorbed. Together, these networks contain between 400 and 600 million neurons. For comparison, that's more than your spinal cord contains, more than your entire peripheral nervous system outside the intestines. And here's the crucial point. This system can function completely autonomously. If you cut the vagus nerve, the main connection between your intestines and your brain, your ENS keeps working. Your intestines keep moving, secreting, absorbing. They don't need your head. No other organ can do this. Your heart needs instructions from your brain, your lungs too, but your intestines, they manage themselves. The discovery of the enteric nervous system is a fascinating story of science long ignored. As early as 1899, researchers Bayliss and Starling described the law of the intestine, the fact that intestines react reflexively to pressure and stretch, even when completely isolated from the central nervous system. But it took nearly a century before anyone understood the full implications. In 1998, Michael Gershon, neurogastroenterologist at Columbia University, published his groundbreaking book, The Second Brain. He had spent decades mapping the ENS and concluded something revolutionary. The intestines contain a complete, independent nervous system. Gershon also discovered something surprising about serotonin, the happiness hormone. 95% of all serotonin in your body is produced in your intestines, not in your brain. The ENS makes and uses the same neurotransmitters as your head. We now know that the ENS is not a primitive reflex system. It's a sophisticated neural network that integrates, learns, and decides. The ENS has three main functions. The first is motor control, directing intestinal movements. The myenteric plexus coordinates the peristaltic waves that propel food. This is not a simple reflex. It's a coordinated dance of contraction and relaxation, precisely timed along the full length of your intestines. The second function is secretory control. Your intestines secrete liters of fluid daily, digestive enzymes, mucus, electrolytes. The ENS determines where, when, and how much. The third function is sensory monitoring. Your intestinal wall is studded with sensors for stretch, for chemical composition, for temperature, for pH. The ENS integrates all this information and adjusts its behavior. But here's where it gets interesting for our story. Your microbiome is deeply intertwined with all these functions. Gut bacteria produce substances that act directly on ENS neurons. Short-chain fatty acids, butyrate, propionate, acetate activate specific receptors on intestinal neurons. They influence the speed of peristalsis, the degree of secretion, the sensitivity of sensors. A 2022 study in gastroenterology showed that germ-free mice without a microbiome have abnormal ENS development. Fewer neurons, weaker connections, disrupted function. The microbiome is necessary for normal ENS development. Conversely, the ENS influences the microbiome. The speed of intestinal transit, regulated by the ENS, determines which bacteria can thrive. Too fast and slow-growing species are flushed out. Too slow and fermentation gets out of hand. The ENS and the microbiome are not separate systems. They are co-evolutionary partners that constantly influence each other. Although the ENS can function autonomously, it's not isolated. It constantly communicates with your brain, primarily via the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in your body. It runs from your brainstem to virtually every organ in your abdomen, including your intestines. And here's the fascinating part. 80% of the fibers in the vagus nerve are afferent. They send information upward from intestines to brain. Only 20% are efferent, instructions from brain to intestines. Your intestines talk more to your brain than the other way around. This explains why gut health has such an impact on mood and cognition. The vagus nerve constantly transports information about the state of your intestines to your brain. Inflammation, your brain hears it. Microbiome dysbiosis, your brain feels it. A 2011 study in PNAS demonstrated this dramatically. Mice that received a probiotic, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, showed reduced anxiety behavior, but when researchers cut the vagus nerve, this effect completely disappeared. The probiotic didn't work directly on the brain. It worked via the ENS and the vagus nerve. The vagus is the highway along which your gut-brain communicates with your head-brain, and that highway is constantly in operation. At Cosmo Group, we learn to respect the ENS as a full player in health. Early in our practice, we focused mainly on microbiome composition, which bacteria were present, but we noticed that some people with good microbiomes still had complaints. Something else was at play. When we started looking at ENS function, motility, secretion, sensory sensitivity, puzzle pieces fell into place. A woman in her early 50s illustrates this. Years of abdominal complaints despite a reasonably diverse microbiome, constipation alternating with diarrhea, bloated feeling, unexplained anxiety. Her ENS was the problem. Years of stress had lowered her vagal tone. The activity of her vagus nerve was reduced. Her intestines were receiving too few rest and digest signals. Her ENS was in chronic alertness. We specifically trained her vagus nerve. Breathing exercises that increase vagal tone, cold exposure for vagal activation, and yes, microbiome support to produce the right signals. After 4 months, her motility had normalized, her anxiety reduced, her ENS had learned to relax again. She summarized it. I didn't know my intestines could be stressed independently of me. The aha moment, You literally have two brains and they need to work together. Your ENS is not a primitive system that just processes food. It's a sophisticated neural network that learns, remembers, and makes decisions. It produces neurotransmitters. It influences your mood. It constantly communicates with your head brain. And your microbiome is the third partner in this conversation. Bacteria that produce signals that influence both brains. When this trio, head brain, gut brain, microbiome, works in harmony, you function optimally. When one of the three is disrupted, the problems resonate through the entire system. Take care of your gut brain as you take care of your head brain. It deserves the same attention. 3 biohacks specifically for ENS health. 1. Vagus nerve activation. Slow, deep abdominal breathing activates your vagus nerve. 4 seconds inhale, 6 seconds exhale, 5 minutes per day. This signals your ENS that it's safe to relax. 2. Bitter substances. Bitter tastes activate receptors in your intestinal wall that stimulate the ENS. Rocket, radicchio, grapefruit, dark chocolate. Start your meal with something bitter to wake up your ENS for digestion. 3. Movement after eating. A short walk of 10 to 15 minutes after your meal stimulates healthy peristalsis. Your ENS responds to movement. Sitting after eating slows your intestinal movements. Walking activates them. 3 simple interventions, 3 ways to support your second brain. This was a special bonus episode of Cosmo Talks. Remember, you're not a machine that can break down. You're an ecosystem with not one, but 2 brains working together. And when that collaboration functions optimally, when the crosstalk is right between head brain, gut brain, and microbiome, you flourish. Want to discover more? Visit cosmogroup.eu. Until next time.